Just before we start today's video, we want to bring you a word from our amazing sponsor, June's Journey. Easily, one of my favorite types of games are hidden object puzzle games, and the best one I've ever played is June's Journey. June's Journey is set in the roaring 1920s, and it follows June Parker as she tries to solve the murder of her sister. But the more she investigates, the more family secrets she uncovers. These are secrets that people would rather keep buried. The game is also full of fun, colorful characters who June helps out. These amazing characters enrich the already exciting story. Not only does June's Journey have a great, thrilling story at its core, but it's also a lot of fun. I've spent hours playing the hidden object puzzle games. The locations are rich and vibrant and really invoke the 1920s. I love playing June's Journey when I'm unwinding at the end of the day while I'm watching TV. It's one of those games that is challenging enough to be fun and engaging, but it isn't too hard that's frustrating. Something else I really like doing in the game is sprucing up the mansion and the garden to suit my personality. Download June's Journey for free by clicking on the link in the description or by scanning the QR code on the screen. June's Journey is available on Android and iOS mobile devices, as well as on PC through Facebook Games. Thank you so much to June's Journey for sponsoring this episode. Number 3. Warren Harris Jr. On Valentine's Day 1977, 47-year-old Robert Gray was found stabbed to death in his apartment in New Orleans, Louisiana. Gray had been stabbed at least 50 times. A few weeks later, on March 12, 1977, 32-year-old James McClure was found dead in a vacant lot about a block from his home in New Orleans. He had been stabbed 10 times in the back and 4 times in the abdomen. His wallet, a ring, and a gold watch had been stolen. In March 1977, 38-year-old Jack Seville was the advertising director at Whirlins for Music, a musical instrument and sheet music store in New Orleans. On March 21, 1977, one of his neighbors arrived home and discovered Seville's apartment door open. He looked in and saw Seville laying on the floor. He had been stabbed once in the chest with a 12-inch kitchen knife. The knife was found on a nearby table. Nothing had been stolen from the apartment. 59-year-old Alden Delano also worked for Whirlins for Music. He was a piano teacher. Delano was from Lewiston, Maine. He had served in World War II. For the past 22 years, he had been living in New Orleans. On April 1, 1977, about a week and a half after his co-worker was stabbed to death, 59-year-old Alden Delano was found dead in his apartment. His murder was very similar to Jack Seville's murder. He had also been stabbed to death in his apartment with a kitchen knife. A major difference was that it appeared that Delano had been robbed. His pockets were turned inside out and his apartment had been ransacked. At this point, there was a belief that one person was behind all the murders. All 4 men were gay and lived alone. 3 of the men, Robert Gray, Jack Seville, and Alden Delano, were killed in their apartments. Also, they all had sex shortly before they were killed. All 4 men were stabbed to death within an 8-block stretch of the French Quarter. So the killer got the nickname, the French Quarter Stabber. The gay community was living in fear of the killer. The police increased their presence in the French Quarter. On April 7, 1977, about 2 months after the first murder, there was a 5th murder. 77-year-old Ernest Pommier was found stabbed to death in his apartment in the French Quarter by his landlord. He was in a kneeling position and had been stabbed 78 times in the head, neck, arms, and shoulders. He was shirtless, his pants had been pulled down, and he did not have any underwear on. However, he had not been sexually assaulted. The police thought he might have been killed while resisting being raped. One big difference between Pommier and the other victims was that he was not gay. Nevertheless, the police were confident that the French Quarter stabber killed him. Then, on April 13, 1977, less than a week after Ernest Pommier was murdered, the police arrested 16-year-old Warren Harris. A seaman had been robbed and nearly killed. An informant told the police that Harris was responsible for the robbery and assault. Harris had a criminal record. 3 years earlier, in 1974, he had spent time in a juvenile detention center for attempting to steal a car. Harris was an 8th grade dropout. After dropping out of school, he moved in with a roommate who was described in newspaper accounts as an avowed transsexual. The police interrogated Harris, and he confessed to 4 of the 5 murders. They said they were convinced that he did not kill James McClure. They never explained why they didn't think he killed McClure, but McClure's murder was different from the other murders because he was killed in a vacant lot, while the others were killed in their apartments. The police asked Harris why he killed the men, and he said that gay people repulsed him. He claimed that at least 2 of the men, Alden Delano and Ernest Pommier, had attempted to rape him, so he killed them. By all accounts, Harris did not identify as gay. Warren Harris Jr. was charged with the murder of the 4 men. Afterward, Harris recanted his confession. He said he had been coerced. Harris, who is black, claimed he was handcuffed for 10 to 15 hours while 10 white detectives shouted at him. He also said that if he did not go along with the investigation, they were going to shoot him in the head and throw his body into the river. Harris went to trial in October 1977 for the 4 murders. The main evidence against him was his confession, which was read aloud in court. His defense lawyer argued that the confession was coerced. The jury deliberated for 2 hours and 25 minutes. Warren Harris was found guilty of 3 of the 4 murders. The murder he was acquitted of was the first one, Robert Gray's murder. No explanation could be found as to why he was acquitted of that murder. Then the jury deliberated his sentence for about 90 minutes. Although he was 17 at the time of the trial and 16 when he committed the murders, he could have been sentenced to death. However, the jury recommended life without the chance of parole. In November 1977, Harris was sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences without the chance of parole. He was then sent to the infamous Louisiana State Penitentiary, also known as Angola. The prison, which is the largest in the United States, was originally a plantation. With 3 back-to-back life sentences without the chance of parole, it appeared that Warren Harris Jr. was going to spend the rest of his life in prison. But then, in 2012, the United States Supreme Court ruled on Miller v. Alabama, and they decided it was cruel and unusual punishment to sentence people who committed their crimes under the age of 18 to life without parole. In 2016, in Montgomery v. Louisiana, the Supreme Court made it retroactive. So in April 2024, 63-year-old Warren Harris Jr. applied for parole. At his parole hearing, he apologized for committing the murders. He said at the time he was addicted to heroin and killed the men to steal money to pay for the drugs. He said that in prison he reevaluated his life after finding religion. He earned 41 certificates for Bible studies behind bars. He also worked in the prison's hospice. Harris said if released, he would be a positive contributor to society. He has several nephews, and he said that one of them and his friends were going down the wrong path. Harris said he was worried they were going to end up in prison or dead, so he wants to talk to them and convince them to find a better path in life. There were 3 members on the parole board, and they voted 2-1 to parole him. After serving 47 years for the 3 murders, Harris was released. Warren Harris Jr., aka the French Quarter Stabber, is a free man at the time of this recording. Number 2. Jiří Straka. On April 8, 1985, in Prague, Czech Republic, a 23-year-old mother of 2, identified only as Alicia P., went to meet her boyfriend. She never showed up and did not return home. The police were called, and the next day, they searched a cherry orchard near her home. Under some leaves, they found her dead body. Her death had been brutal. She had been raped. She had been strangled, and dirt, leaves, and stones had been shoved into her mouth. Dirt and leaves were also stuffed into her nostrils. She had asphyxiated to death. About a month later, on May 4th, 1985, a 54-year-old woman identified as Velsta Shah was taking the tram home. She deboarded and started walking home. As she was looking for her keys, she was grabbed from behind and pulled into a parking lot for trucks. A rope was looped around her neck, then her attacker put a knee on her back and strangled her with the rope. He then threw her in the back of a truck. Vlasta woke up a short time later and sought help at a nearby home. She survived and had not been sexually assaulted, but she had been robbed. A few hours later, a 30-year-old doctor, Farah F., was walking home from the tram. She was attacked from behind. She was beaten in the head with her shoe and then raped. She was then strangled to death with her bra. Less than 2 weeks later, on May 16, 1985, 30-year-old Marta M. was found murdered in the basement of an abandoned house. She had been raped, and there were 3 tourniquets around her neck. The tourniquets were made from upholstery material, a sweater belt, and her bra. For 3 reasons, the police believe that the 3 murders were committed by one man. The first is that the murders were all committed the day before the start of the traditional work week, a Sunday or a holiday. Secondly, the semen was tested and was all from the same blood group. Third, metal particles were found on all the clothes. The murderer was called the Spartakiad Killer. The Spartakiads was a mass gymnastics event held in Prague every 5 years. The event was said to be held a few weeks before the last murder. Psychiatrists consulted on the case, and they believed that the killer was between the ages of 18 and 28. They also said that the murders were sex crimes, and a person who commits these types of murders doesn't start off killing their victims right away. They begin by committing less serious crimes, then they escalate. The police decide to look at any unsolved cases of sexual assault against women in the area. They discovered one that happened on February 7th, 2 months before the first murder. 20-year-old Milana H. was attacked from behind, not far from the orchard where the first murder was committed. Milana said that the man strangled her, then she and her attacker fell to the ground together. She managed to talk to him, and she said she would do whatever he wanted, but she wanted to go someplace more comfortable. The attacker agreed, and they started walking. When they got near some houses, Milana started screaming, and her attacker ran away. Initially, Milana didn't report the assault because she was worried it would ruin the young man's life. But after the murder, she decided to tell the police what happened. She gave a detailed description of the man who attacked her. On April 2, 1985, 6 days before the first murder, 18-year-old Ludmila S. had taken the tram home. She arrived at her station at around 2 a.m. A young man offered to walk her home so nothing bad would happen to her, and she accepted. As they walked, the young man said his name was Jiří, and he was 16 years old. He said he was doing a mining apprenticeship near Kladno, a city about 18 miles northwest of downtown Prague. He also mentioned Stockholm, a city about 8 miles west of Kladno. So the police looked for a 16-year-old named Jiří who was taking a mining apprenticeship in Stockholm. It led them to Jiří Straka. Jiří was born on April 14, 1969 in Prague, meaning he was just 15 when the first murder was committed. He was the middle child with an older sister and younger brother. By all accounts, he had a good home life and he wasn't abused. When Jiří was a young child, his parents said that they did not get a sense that anything was wrong with him. They only noted that he seemed more emotional than the other children. For example, one time he cried because his sister stepped on an ant. But then, as Jiří got older, they noticed problems with him. It was as if he went the polar opposite with his emotions and no longer showed emotions. He also did inappropriate things just to do them, and not because he was angry. For example, one day he cut the curtains in his family's home. When he was 8 years old, he was taken to a psychiatric hospital. The doctor said he lacked morals and feelings. However, he was very bright. He had an IQ of 125, which is in the above average or bright category. When Jiří was a young teen, it's believed he set a barn on fire. He claimed that someone put his cigarette out incorrectly. On May 22, 1985, 6 days after the third murder, the police went to Jiří's dormitory at his school. They found a piece of identity belonging to Ludmila in his room. Ludmila had escaped from him and given the police the information that led to his arrest. Jiří Straka was arrested. He quickly confessed to the 3 murders, plus 8 other attacks where he did not kill the victims. He was surprised to learn that 54-year-old Vlasta survived the attack. He said he saw her getting off the tram and followed her, thinking she was younger. When he realized she was in her 50s, he decided not to sexually assault her. But he decided to kill her so she wouldn't go to the police. What struck the police was that Jiří didn't show remorse for his actions. He said his only regret was getting caught. He reenacted the murders for the police and the media. This angered the public, and there were calls for him to be released so he could be lynched. But the police refused to release him. Jiří pleaded guilty to 3 murders, 2 attempted murders, 5 rapes, 3 robberies, and 5 thefts. Since he was only 15 and 16 when the murders were committed, he received the maximum punishment for a juvenile, which was 10 years in prison. Plus, he would have to be chemically castrated. Had Jiří been a few years older, he probably would have been sentenced to death. Jiří had a difficult time in prison. One time, the inmates tried to hang him, and he said he was only saved by luck. But during the attack, he was kicked in the genitals very hard. Later, when he was being chemically castrated, the doctor said it probably wasn't necessary because the kick had severely damaged his genitals. Another time, he was nearly killed by another inmate with a toilet. In May 1994, after Jiří served about 9 years, the Czech president granted him amnesty and he was released from prison. He was then transferred to a psychiatric hospital where he resided for 10 years. After his release in 2014, he changed his last name to Novak. He married his girlfriend, who was a nurse he met at the hospital. He became a stepfather to her child from a previous relationship. They moved to a village on the Czech-Polish border. Both Jiří and his parents have given interviews to the media. His parents said that they probably would have taken their own life had it not been for Jiří's brother, who was still a young boy at the time of the murders. They said they loved Jiří, but they said that it probably would have been better if he had been hanged. Please note that all the following quotes were translated from Czech to English using the Cambridge Dictionary website, so they may not be completely accurate. Jiří's mother said, quote, "The death penalty should have been better for my son, and for us too. I've always said that. Now of hatred. Despite the horrible things he did, he still remains my son. But I knew what awaited him in prison. He survived that prison Valdez only because he played a whore to the stronger," unquote. His father said, quote, "It would have been better if Jiří had been sentenced to death at that time. It would have been a liberation for him and for us too," unquote. Jiří has admitted several times he would have continued killing had he not been caught. But he says he has no plans for committing any further crimes. He said that since he wasn't hanged, he just wants to be left alone to live his life. He said that people have also pressured him to take his own life. He said, quote, "I won't make you happy. If you want to kill me, then kill me," unquote. At the time of this recording, Jiří Novak, formerly Jiří Straka, is 55 years old. He has been free for 14 years and has not had any problems with the law during that time. Number 1. Christine Falling. Christine Laverne Slaughter was born in March 1963 in Perry, Florida. Her mother, Anne, was 16, and her father, Edward, was 65. Christine was the second of her mother's 8 children. However, it's possible Anne had more children. Christine's sister, Carol, was 2 years older than her. Anne was largely absent from her daughters' lives. Sometimes after disappearing for a long time, she returned pregnant. Edward denied he was the father of Christine and Carol. He was negligent and abusive. When Christine was 4, she and Carol were adopted by Jesse and Dolly Falling. They were a religious couple who took the girls to church. There's some speculation that Jesse physically and sexually abused Carol and Christine, but the Fallings have always denied this. In late 1975, 12-year-old Christine fled the Fallings' home to live with her biological mother. This was a turbulent time in Christine's life. Between November 1975 and March 1976, Christine lived at 5 different addresses. Christine also barely attended school and then dropped out in the 7th grade. She was tested and had an IQ of about 85, which is the low end of average intelligence. In September 1977, when Christine was just 14, she married her 20-year-old stepbrother. The relationship was rocky and only lasted 6 months. In February 1980, Christine was living in a small home with 2 unrelated families in Blountstown, Florida. On February 25, 1980, 16-year-old Christine called the sheriff's department. She had been alone in a room with one of the children who lived in the house, Cassie Johnson, who went by the name Muffin. Muffin was several weeks past her 2nd birthday. She had stopped breathing and was in a coma. Muffin was taken to the hospital, and she was diagnosed with encephalitis, which is inflammation of the brain. 3 days later, 2-year-old Cassie Muffin Johnson died. After that, Christine moved out and started crashing with relatives. She moved back and forth between homes in Perry and Lakeland, Florida. She often cleaned and babysat for room and board. A year after Muffin's death, on February 23, 1981, 17-year-old Christine was babysitting 4-year-old Jeffrey Michael Davis at his mother's home in Lakeland. Jeffrey was the son of a friend of Christine's 2 adoptive sisters. Christine called over neighbors because Jeffrey had stopped breathing. She said he had been napping, but then didn't wake up. He was taken to the hospital and pronounced dead. 3 days later, a funeral service was held for Jeffrey. During the funeral service, Christine was tasked with watching the 2-year-old son of her adoptive sister, Geneva Burnett Daniels. Her son, Joseph Spring, who went by Joe Boy, had been sick for several weeks. He had been taken to the hospital in 3 different cities because he was suffering from fevers and convulsions. Christine called 911. She said that Joe Boy had been napping, and then suddenly he woke up screaming. She went into the room, and he was dead. The deaths of the 2 boys were attributed to myocarditis, which is an inflammation of a heart muscle. But the odd thing is that it's rarely fatal. 4.5 months later, on July 14, 1981, Christine went out with her adoptive sister, Geneva Burnett Daniels, and her 8-month-old baby, Jennifer Daniels. Jennifer had been sick with fevers and convulsions, like her half-brother, Joe Boy. That day, they took Jennifer to get her polio vaccine, then to the grocery store to buy baby food. In the grocery store, Jennifer started fussing, so they left quickly and got into their car. Geneva was driving, and Christine was holding Jennifer. Jennifer suddenly stopped making noise and moving. Christine told Geneva she was dead. They rushed to the hospital, where 8-month-old Jennifer was pronounced dead. The medical examiner could not find a cause of death. Encephalitis and myocarditis were both ruled out. Jennifer also didn't have an allergic reaction to the polio vaccine. Another thing the doctor ruled out was foul play. Both the doctor and Geneva were convinced that Christine did not purposely cause Jennifer's death. There was some speculation that Christine was sick and was somehow infecting the children. She was tested, but nothing was found. While there's no evidence that Christine did anything to the children, people did not trust her with their children. But one person who was willing to take a chance on her was 77-year-old Wilburn Swindle. He hired her to be a housekeeper. On January 4th, 1982, the first day 18-year-old Christine was working for him, he died. The police believed he died of natural causes. Christine started to feel ostracized, so she left the state. She lived in West Virginia and Ohio for a while. In May 1982, she returned to Blountstown, Florida. Shortly after returning to Blountstown, Christine moved into her new boyfriend's trailer. Lisa had a newborn son, Travis Coleman. Shortly after returning to Brownsville, Christine moved into a trailer of her new boyfriend. Her boyfriend was the uncle of Muffin Johnson, who was the first baby to die. Lisa Coleman wasn't aware of Christine's history of untimely deaths of children in her care. So on the night of July 2nd, 1982, Lisa left 2-month-old Travis with Christine. The next morning, Christine said she was fixing a bottle for the baby. She said that when she went to get him, she discovered he was dead. The medical examiner noted there were no signs of foul play, but the fact that this was the 5th child to die while Christine was around was too much of a coincidence for him. So he started an investigation. This led to bodies being exhumed and a committee of 4 doctors to review the findings. 9 days after Travis Coleman's death, on July 12, 1982, Christine checked herself into a psychiatric hospital for a mental evaluation. On July 20, 1982, while in the hospital, she admitted to murdering the 5 children. She was released from the hospital 2 weeks later and charged with the murders of Muffin Johnson and Travis Coleman. Muffin was the first child to die, and Travis was the last. 4 days after she was arrested, Travis's cause of death was made public. He had died from a total lack of oxygen. So it's believed he was strangled or suffocated. Christine pleaded not guilty to the 2 charges of murder. About 2 months later, she was charged with the murder of Jennifer Daniels, the 4th child who died. The district attorney offered Christine a plea deal. If she pleaded guilty to the 3 murders, they would drop the possibility of the death penalty and consecutive life sentences, and she would not be charged with the other 3 murders. Instead, she'd be sentenced to 3 concurrent life sentences with a possibility of parole after 25 years. So she could have been released as early as 2007 when she was 44. Christine accepted the plea deal, and in December 1982, she pleaded guilty to 3 counts of first-degree murder. The first 10 minutes of the recorded confession was played for the court. She said the first child, 2-year-old Muffin Johnson, was too rowdy, so she strangled her to death with her bare hands. She said she was in a bad mood the day 4-year-old Jeffrey Davis died. He had been outside and came back in with what she thought was white spray paint. This made her angry, so she strangled him to death. With Joe Boy Spring, Christine said he was napping, and then suddenly she got the urge to kill him. So she strangled the 2-year-old boy. She said that 8-month-old Jennifer Davis annoyed her because she cried too much, so she choked her while she was in the car with Jennifer's mother, who was her adoptive sister. She didn't have a reason why she killed 2-month-old Travis Coleman. She said he was sleeping, so she picked him up and strangled him to death. At the end of her confession, she said, quote, "I don't know why I'd done none of this," unquote. During the recording, Christine did not confess to the murder of 77-year-old Wilburn Swindle. She later said she held him while a man, whom she never identified, strangled him to death with a phone cord. She said they also robbed him. Christine Falling applied for parole for the first time in November 2017 after serving 35 years. She was denied parole. She'll have another parole hearing in November 2024. At the time of this recording, 61-year-old Christine Falling is serving her sentence at the Lowell Correctional Institute in Ocala, Florida. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Please don't forget to check out today's sponsor, June's Journey. You can download the game by scanning the QR code on the screen now, or by clicking on the link below. Once again, thank you very much for watching today's video.